the things that we complain about now are not as drastic as what we had to complain about in the past. Ads are allowed in the birth room. Epidurals are offered, but not required. There's a lot of things here that have become a lot better. So the truth is, it's all about informed consent and awareness, right? And that's why you guys are here. That's kind of what we talk about on this podcast. So just know that is absolutely a myth. You are in charge of your body, no matter how you choose to give birth. It is my biggest wish that you have all the information going in so that you get to be part of the decision.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started.
All right, this episode just seems like so much fun because I feel like what sparked it for me was I feel like I'm hearing all the time just the repetition of the myths that are still happening around birth, which is totally fine as long as you have people to dispel them for you. I think it's totally fine. And some of it's pretty funny. So I actually went back and I was like, let's talk about from our grandmother's era, what these myths look like, onto what our moms were told, and let's kind of debunk some of the myths that still exist today. So some of it is straight up funny. However, I want you to realize that people actually believed these things, and some of them are still believed today. So it's interesting to see just how these things getting passed down can actually become a part of what we do during our pregnancies and birth experiences. And I just think it's really interesting how myths work. So let's I thought it would be fun too. It kind of honors women from generation to generation, right? We're not totally making fun of them. This was real for them at that time. And we have to have a little bit of gentleness and laughter with it because some of them, now that we know, now that we are here, now that we know, we can kind of laugh and say, I don't know how we could have thought that was true, but here we are. Okay, myth number 1. Now, these first couple ones are coming from 1940s to 1970s. These are some of the things that moms were hearing, legitimately thought that they were true. Okay, myth number 1. Don't lift your arms over your head or the cord is going to get wrapped around the baby. That was a legit do not be doing, any of the raising of the roof kind of stuff. Don't do it. And we know now, right? We exercise all throughout. There's all kinds of lifting, getting boxes, whatever. We know that. But that was the idea. At the time, umbilical cord issues they just weren't completely understood. And people were trying to kind of explain through this. And so they're like, well, let's try this. Don't lift your arms over your head. Let's see how that works. Now we know that the cord position is not affected by arm movement. However, there are some things that can affect it. So for example, if you have a lot of amniotic fluid, then there could be the issue of, and if baby isn't settled down into that pelvis, then there could be an issue of that cord coming first. That's one of the things that they worry about too with a baby that's breech, particularly, and if you're having twins, that can be another one. But if your baby is breech, then you have to make sure that the cord is not coming first, right? Because the head it kind of blocks it off and whatever. And yes, there's the cord can get pinched with the head. But anyways, that's something that we don't have to worry about our arms, right? Certainly not. That is not something that you have to worry about as far as the cord goes. So just know that it is okay to put your arms over your head. You can do your weight exercises over your head. You can do however you want to lift your arms. You can hug your husband with a nice big hug around his head. It's totally fine. Totally good to go. Now, myth 2, you should stay in bed most of pregnancy. I don't know if you guys remember this at all, there was this like big thing of take it easy, rest, put your feet up, don't move around too much. You got to let that baby grow safely. And actually, we know that that can be detrimental because we need to be able to move our bodies. Moving our bodies is really good for our circulation, for the baby getting what they need from the placenta. Like there's a lot of reasons that we need to be moving our body. But at the time, pregnancy was kind of viewed as this like fragile medical condition during that time. And they thought rest would prevent complications. And now we know, right, if a mom is having some spotting or regular bleeding, like things like that, that oftentimes what they're told to do is rest. If you have like a blood clot internally between placenta and uterus, something like that, then that's a time that you rest. So when your provider tells you to rest, yes, but it is not every pregnancy, the whole time you should not be resting. You actually should be moving. And like I said, it's not only good for like those circulatory things, but it's good for your mood. And it actually leads to better labor outcomes, including a shortening of a labor if you walk during labor. So there you go. Myth number 3, no sex during pregnancy. They literally thought that it could harm the baby. And I mean, it's already weird enough. Let's be real. Any of you know, especially with that first baby, at least maybe I'm just speaking from experience, but any of you know, like your husbands are like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, am I going to be poking them on the head here? Like, what is happening, right? So it's already weird enough. But then to think like you could harm the baby, you know, I'm sure that people kind of kicked off that. Now, maybe women came up with this one and they were like, we don't want to be touched. Just tell them we can't be poking the baby. I don't know. But some women, you know, really enjoy it. Some really don't. So it just is what it is. But that was kind of the idea back then. And so, yeah, as far as we know now, sex is healthy. You can do it when you are pregnant. It supports connection. It supports that oxytocin. We talk about like if your bag of waters is intact and you are trying to go into labor, we recommend intercourse and making sure that dad finishes because sperm is a natural prostaglandin, which helps soften the cervix. And then obviously you get the oxytocin from mom finishing. And there is some really good information out there that says actually it's really, really good for you to be doing this. Now, if your bag of waters is broken, if you're having pain when you do it, things like that, then obviously don't do it. But generally speaking, sex is safe. Myth number 4, don't gain too much weight or your baby will be too big. Now, this is separate from gestational diabetes. However, they had limited science when it came to nutrition. So the idea was if you don't eat too much, if you don't gain too much weight, you won't have a difficult birth, which we all know is not necessarily the case. Really, it has a lot to do with how we take care of our bodies during pregnancy, how we're fueling our bodies, how we're moving our bodies, how we're taking care of our mind and all of that stuff. So it is a much bigger picture, but they were doing the best with the information that they had and they were giving it their best guess. However, it is a complete myth. So that is not true. It does not, and we've talked about this, right? Women gain what they gain. If you're eating healthy, a healthy, well-balanced diet, then you gain what you gain and you leave the rest at bay, right? I'm going to tell you, eat meat, eat protein. You want to eat lots of protein. You're like that 80 to 120 grams a day plus of protein, and then focus on the other stuff afterwards. But some women are going to gain, even with that diet, some women are going to gain, 10 to 15 pounds and others are going to gain 70. And sometimes it's just what your body needs. Your body it's smart. It knows what it's going to do or what it needs to be able to do what it needs to do. And so you just kind of have to trust the process. But it's kind of funny that these were some of the things that we thought. And actually, that one does get passed down, I feel like, even to today. So myth number 5, cravings mean your baby needs that food. Now, I feel like I give all of you permission to use this myth till the end of time. However, it is not necessarily that if you're eating apples, you need whatever's in apples, or tomatoes, you need what's in tomatoes. And maybe there is some amount of truth to that, depending on which nutrients and whatever, you're craving salt or whatever. Perhaps intuitively there is some, but when you're craving a big fat slice of chocolate cake, it's not because you need the sugar and junk that is in the slice of chocolate cake. So same thing. There's another thing where moms will crave non-food items like gasoline. And I don't mean the smell of it. Like they literally crave the taste of it, or like aerosols, or just like weird things. And I think it's called pica. Anyways, and that is not a good thing. Definitely do not give in to those. Do not taste any of that stuff. Let your provider know. They can help you kind of work through some things. But just know that I will absolutely let you hold on to this craving myth, but it's not necessarily true. Make sure that if you are, craving, especially that junk food, that you are certainly getting enough of the good stuff that you need for that baby, drinking lots of water, making sure you're having good bowel movements, walking, moving your body. Do not sit on the couch like they used to with your, bag of potato chips and your 2 liter of Dr. Pepper and go into town and saying, I'm eating for 2 and this is just what I'm craving. Back up, unless you're having a really rough day. And then I support that as well. Okay, myth number 6. You should be put to sleep for birth. This is an actual thing that happened during these years. It was called twilight sleep. So without getting into too much of the history, just know that birth used to happen outside of the hospital via midwives. Hospitals opened up, and there was this big smear campaign against out-of-hospital midwives to make the hospital look like the better, safer option. And what they did was they brought women into the hospital setting, removed the dads. They were not allowed in the birth room whatsoever, and they did something called twilight sleep. It's actually really bad for mom, really bad for baby. And at the time, it was kind of like, you don't need to be in pain during labor. This is unnecessary. And women really weren't included in the decision-making process of this. So you had men in hospital settings as doctors kind of deciding what was going to happen to your body and your baby during this process. And so women would be put into this twilight sleep, and it's not that they didn't feel the pain of labor. Even with the twilight sleep, they had these wraps that would go around their wrists and stuff, tie them down to the beds. This was real stuff that women paid to go do, thinking this is the best thing for my baby and this is how you work through labor during this era. So just know that that time existed and it is no more. And we pray it never comes back. And we are grateful that we learned from the past, and we're going to move forward and trust our bodies, trust our babies. And we have, we have providers now that do a lot better. And so the things that we complain about now are not as drastic as what we had to complain about in the past. Dads are allowed in the birth room. Epidurals are offered, but not required. There's a lot of things here that have become a lot better. So the truth is, it's all about informed consent and awareness, right? And that's why you guys are here. That's kind of what we talk about on this podcast. And so just know that that is absolutely a myth. You are in charge of your body, no matter how you choose to give birth. It is my biggest wish that you have all the information going in so that you get to be part of the decision. Now, let's go on to this next little bit where we're going to talk about kind of our mom's generation, which would be like 1970s to 1990s. Now, I'm talking to you guys. My parents were born in the 60s. So as we're moving through these generations, the generations are going to change. Now it's going to be I'm the mom generation that's giving the mitts to this generation of children that are about to have babies. That's a crazy place for me to be, you guys. When I started this 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, whenever we started doing this, holy cow, and I had itty bitty babies, and now they are all growing up, and it's the best thing and the worst thing. And anyways, motherhood, right? But here we are. Okay. Myth number 7, formula is better than breast milk. So this is an actual thing that was like, no, it has everything that they need. It's fortified. It's, all this stuff. And there was a big marketing campaign for formula as well. It's this modern, scientific, superior thing that is supposed to be just so much better for babies than mother's breast milk, which, let's be honest, that's just silly. Our breast milk is biologically designed for our babies, and breastfeeding is good for mom and baby. It's not just the connection that we have. It's the immunological properties. It's, when you get sick and you make antibodies and all this stuff, your milk adjusts for different times of day and night to provide what your baby needs for being awake and for being asleep. And it's just kind of incredible how much our babies do need our breast milk. And so if you are unable to breastfeed for whatever reason, I don't want you to feel bad. And we are grateful that there are things like formula or donor milk or however you choose to feed your baby. However, you should know that it really is best to be able to nurse your babies with your breast milk, and that it is perfectly designed for them, that God doesn't make mistakes that way. And so if you are here and you are listening today and you're wondering about breast milk and breast milk versus formula and all of that, keep your babies close, nurse as often as you can. If you need to be in a situation where you pump, thank goodness there are things that you can do to be able to pump and whatever. But know that you are doing, even if they're only getting a little, even if you're only doing the morning feed or the nighttime feed, any amount of breast milk you can feed your baby is going to be really good for them. Okay, myth number 8. You should schedule inductions for convenience. This is still going on, let's be honest, but it was much bigger during that time. I hope we're kind of hitting on this whole induction thing. We saw 2020, now we're coming back around to like Induction Central, and that, it has to do with the Arrive trial and the other stuff too. But this is where induction was like, convenience, oh, your mother's going to be in town or your doctor is going out of town, you can do it at this time, or you want that, particular date for their birthday. We can make that happen. And a lot of it really had to do with hospital efficiency, right? And we've seen from this beginning where they started introducing induction, especially as more of a convenience thing, that we always say, and it is still true to this day, that hospital inductions spike closer to the weekends and closer to holidays. You are always going to see a spike in those. And it's not that you're not having conversations about it necessarily. It's like, oh, I'm going out of town, I'm going to be on vacation, or oh, my mom's going to be here because of, whatever. So like some of that still holds and it's still an option should you choose to do it. However, all of that aside, due dates and kind of trying to play with when we think a baby should be here is all messing with the biology of our bodies and really just the perfectness that is our bodies being able to create and nourish, grow, and birth a baby. So our babies are the ones that give us the signal that say, hey, mom, we're ready. And then our brain gets that signal, all the oxytocin, and we start contractions and we have that baby. Once we start messing with some of those things and get in the way of it unnecessarily, there are absolutely reasons for inductions. But just because we want to play around with some things, we put ourselves and our babies at risk. And so if you're aware of those risks and you're aware of the benefits and you make that decision, then wonderful. But what I think is unfair is not giving that information to moms and allowing them to make that decision. Just playing it as like well, I'm sorry, I think we really need to do this, and not giving mom an option. So remember, those due dates are guest dates, and inductions, especially right now, are not as necessary as they are being used. So always question things. It never hurts to ask the questions. Myth number 9, don't question your doctor. Now, we are definitely, and that is completely flopped, right? Our era today and with the way that we deal with medical information and medical providers is very different even than when I was growing up. Certainly when my parents were growing up, because it really was doctors, white coat, authority, science. They know stuff, we trust them with our lives and with everything. Like, they know better. They know best. And it's just not true. And especially today, we have seen medical, and honestly, I think a lot of it for me especially comes from birth, whether it's myself giving birth or being with families that are giving birth. And you watch the information, you watch the things that are said, and you realize not all of this is true. And it's not the only way. The suggestion or recommendation or thing that they're saying you need to do is not the only way to do it. However, we're being made to feel stupid or inadequate or skeptical because we're choosing to ask questions and see if there's a different route to take. So today, I think the medical community is definitely seeing a bit of a pushback, but we're also seeing some clarity that they don't know everything. We don't have all the answers. And the very best thing about that, though, is when we have situations where we're unhappy with our care and we let them know it and over and over and over again request different things, then all of a sudden, those things, it does take time, but they change and they become available to other women. For example, back when I was saying twilight sleep existed and dads were not allowed in the hospital, there were big campaigns with moms calling into the hospitals, different locations, over and over and over, several people together calling and saying, oh, hey, I heard that you guys allow babies, daddies in the doctor's office now or in the labor rooms. Is that true? And of course they were like, no, that's not true. But you have people calling in, oh, okay, well, I'll go birth it, whatever, because I've heard that we've heard that there's a hospital around here doing that. And they called and they called and they called and eventually they started letting dads into the delivery rooms. And now we see today, right? They let dads, they let families, they let whatever. But all of that to say that what we do and what we say makes a difference. So be on top of what you are doing. Let your voice be heard. Keep pushing for good change for moms. That's kind of why we're here. Myth number 10, hospital birth is the only safe option. Okay. Remember my whole smear campaign about midwives and all this stuff? The idea was we've got this rise of medical technology. And so there was this big fear-based message of anything outside of the hospital is unsafe. And this could not be farther from the truth, especially for birth, because what we go to the hospital for should be things that cannot be handled outside of a hospital. And what happened is the hospital that deals with very emergent, serious situations, and that's what they're used to and that's what they train for, started taking on birth. And so how did they treat it? Like this emergent, serious, scary situation. And that's not the reality of it. Now, I know I'll have people argue back and forth, but babies used to die, all these years ago and whatever. And I'm not going to say that some of the practices are much safer now than they were then, but we also have clean running water. We have soap. We have safe homes, clean homes to give birth in. This is a very different situation than, Pioneer wagons or giving birth at a tent or having no doctor or hospital for hundreds of miles. Like, this is a very different lifetime that we live in. And being in a hospital under watchful care of providers and a bunch of outside people and bright lights and sterile situations and all of that is not necessarily the best thing for birth. You can give birth there. You can have a great birth there. In scary situations, moms are going to say, I'm so glad I was here, right? And it's not that the hospital is a bad thing by any means. However, making it sound like it's the only and best and safest is not necessarily true. And it's not even just for the physical safety of mom and baby, but it's how we were treated, how we feel, the opportunity to bond, the smells and stuff that happen at home and how that plays an effect on both mom and baby, the interventions that happen that may not happen at home, being left alone and allowed to labor how you would like instead of being hooked up to monitors and your labor managed. There's just a back and forth there. And we need to understand that birth is a very natural physiological process. It's something that we are literally built to do. We were born with uteruses. It's how our body is designed. We can grow and birth babies. So trust the process, trust yourself. Not that you have to give birth out of a hospital, but just know that it is a very natural process and it should be treated that way no matter where you give birth. Okay, let's talk about those myths that are still alive today, which some of those carried over. But myth number 11. Your water will break in a dramatic gush. I blame TV for this. This was very Hollywood, but it was real once people saw it. And that's the only thing they saw because remember, people used to give birth together in families in their home with everybody watching. And when we moved it to hospitals, the only thing we had to go off of was what we saw on television. And today, even, it's very dramatized, the gush of water. We have to rush to the hospital. Thank goodness we made it in time. And any of our moms listening that have given birth before know it is very, very rarely the case, right? Even if it comes on with the big gush of water, you probably have hours and hours ahead of you. So don't stress. Even with a gush of water, as long as it is clear and odorless and you're doing okay, you're feeling okay, no fever, nothing like that, you're still good to go most of the time. So it's just, I don't know, just a TV thing. But the truth is most water breaks at some point during labor, during active labor. And that means that you've been having contractions for a while. They're getting longer, stronger, closer together. And eventually that water lets go. And in some cases, it doesn't break at all. So that is, baby born in the call, right? And they say it's very lucky. I would assume it's just because it doesn't happen a lot, but it doesn't even have to break at all. Now, myth number 12, first babies always come late. So it is really important when we talk about due dates, and we call them guest dates, that we talk about the length of gestation. Now, with first babies, they say an average time of gestation is 41 and 1/7 weeks, or in other words, 41 weeks and 1 day. If you give birth before or after that, that's totally normal too. This is your average. And the idea is that they don't, and here's the whole late thing, right? Because they're considering 40 weeks due. You should have had a baby by now. And we know that most or many, many moms go past that 40-week due date, especially with their first, and that's very normal. So that's what they would be considering late. But we know that late is relative as well. And it depends on when you ovulate. It depends on when you're actually pregnant. Depends on where they start counting the weeks from, or if they're going off of an ultrasound. Depends on if they move your date for a late ultrasound. There's a lot of things that can be involved with that. And even then, some babies will gestate longer than others. So I remember reading in a book as I was learning about all my childbirth education and stuff. There was a doctor that had a woman that was pregnant for an entire 12 months. And that would not happen today, by the way. They wouldn't even allow it. But he checked on mom, he checked on baby. Everything was fine. She delivered at 12 months, normal sized baby. And now this is obviously very rare, but imagine if they would have taken that baby 3 months early. So again, this is one of those dramatic situations, but quite literally there's babies being taken earlier than they should be all the time via induction because of these guest dates and where mom and baby are totally fine and healthy and they would come when they're ready. So it's just a matter of making sure that you have the right provider, you have these conversations, you trust your body, your intuition. There absolutely are reasons to take babies early and that it's safest for mom and baby and all of that. I'm not going to get into it, but it is really important that you guys have those conversations. Okay. Myth number 3, epidurals mean you won't feel anything. Now, if you've been with me for a little bit, I've definitely talked about this here. I think this is completely unfair where the thing is, a lot of the moms that are getting epidurals today, they're not choosing for the childbirth education and stuff. That's just they know that they want the epidural and they want it because they don't want to feel things. And so they're the ones that never get to hear any of this. And I think that's really unfair. I think every provider should be telling their moms that you will feel something, like you will have labor contractions. And even if you get the epidural, you might still feel your labor contractions. You might still need to feel your labor contractions in order to bring that baby down and out. So no, this is absolutely a myth. And it is important that moms know, even if it is, you're completely numbed, you're still going to feel pressure. You're still going to feel sensation. And there are instances where epidurals don't work or moms are allergic to them or it only works on one side or your body is not doing what it needs to. So you need to back off. And then all of a sudden you're hit with a lot of sensation that you weren't expecting. So heads up, they do not completely take it away. However, they can very much work and you can feel very little if your body responds well to it and it's done right. Myth 14, C-sections are the easy way out. Now, I've heard this a couple of times, oh, you didn't really give birth, you didn't go through it because you had a C-section. Let me tell you from experience, a mother who had to have complete abdominal surgery to get her baby here gave birth. Not only is she going to be recovering from extreme surgery situation for the next 6 weeks or more, but she still has to go through all the bodily changes that happen for the birth of the baby and having a pregnancy. So you still have to, the placenta still exists. They pull the placenta through that incision site, but then mom is still bleeding while everything is healing inside, just like every pregnant woman ever, except she's also healing from the incision site. So then breastfeeding is more of a challenge. Walking is more of a challenge. Sitting up is more of a challenge. So 100%. C-sections are not the easy way out. And it's funny because there was a while there, and I know that it still does exist on a smaller level now, where women were wanting to schedule their C-section so they didn't have to go through labor. So they were a little bit tinier, not as much stretch marks, and they'd get a little tummy tuck at the same time. This is a real thing. And it's not the easy way out for sure. And it's not something that we want to be doing for beauty purposes or anything like that either. We really need to take care of our bodies and our babies. It's really important that we allow our pregnancies to continue on as they're meant to, and that we take these little things in strides, right? These stretch marks or the changes of our body. It's not easy. It takes some adjusting, but it's so worth it. And we just I love the idea of those, those are mama stripes and we earned those. And, that was hard work to get those stripes and to bring this baby here and to do all this stuff. So it's good, important work that you are doing. C-sections, should you need one, are not the easy way out. Get all the love and support and care that you need postpartum for sure. Myth 15, you'll forget the pain. Some of this is true. And I know it's on purpose because if we remembered it perfectly, we probably wouldn't do it over and over and over again. But the reward is so sweet and good and perfect and beautiful that I do think, over time, you're oh, yeah, no, it wasn't that bad. Let's do that again. And in a lot of ways, I think this is why it's so important that at least the story gets told about having unmedicated births. Totally fine should you choose to do whatever you do. I support that 100%. However, I think we don't talk about the beauty and glory of having a birth unmedicated and how it changes you. Birth changes you no matter what. Whether that's a cesarean, whether that's an epidural birth, however you choose to give it, it changes you. That is 100% true. But from my personal experience and from seeing other women who have had the contrast as I have, being in my first, I had a cesarean. My second, I had an epidural. My third was born at home. It is the most magnificent experience ever. And the bonding that happens, the power you feel, the strength you feel, the closeness, in my case, that I felt to my Savior, the closeness that I felt to my husband and the other people in the room. I mean, I was in awe of my own body and ability. And I don't believe I did that by myself, but it is incredible. And it is part of the story. It is just as important to appreciate and feel the strength that comes from birth as it is to give birth and have the baby. So I think, there's a lot of discussion like, you don't need to be on your high horse about it, or you're not any better than anyone else for, doing it. And I hope that's not how the story is being told, because you're right. It's true. Not any better. And there's nothing greater about giving birth unmedicated than not. However, I do think that there is a piece of what happens missing when we do medicate and we kind of shy away from some of those sensations. Now, again, I don't want anyone to feel bad should you choose to do the epidural and whatever, and that's great. And if I had another baby, I can't even say, who knows what would happen and what that situation would be. But there was something really, really wonderful about having that opportunity. But back to that myth about forgetting the pain. Now, I don't know if I have ever shared this on here. I think I have. I'm pretty sure I have. I know I share it within the birth course, but I kind of joke about it because after I had my third baby, so that was my baby that was born at home, completely unmedicated in the water. And my sister texted me, and I can't remember the full conversation, but it was kind of like, how was it and whatever. And all I said was, get the epidural, right? Because it was the most intense thing I had ever done. I had never pushed a baby out and felt all of that before. It was like, whoa, And it was also the most incredible thing in the world. And so it was like, yes, okay, if I can do this, anybody can, right? It's like when I ran a marathon or like whatever the thing is, the really hard thing that you do, that you push, that you train for, that you like accomplish. And you're like, oh, like, was it worth it? And then you get to like in retrospect and look back on it and whatever. And you're like, that was the coolest thing I could have ever done. Like, I love the challenge, right? And that's really like what life is. One big, awesome challenge that we get to kind of work through and look back on and say, wow, I did that. So I think birth is just the perfect segue into motherhood in that regard. Myth 16, you'll instantly bond with your baby. Okay, this is real. Sometimes that is very much the case. For many moms, they give birth, that skin to skin. It's like, oh my gosh, you're finally here. Like, I know you, I love you, and all of this, and it's beautiful. And for other moms, they're not feeling that. They don't connect right away. It takes a little bit. And let me tell you that that's normal and it's totally okay. Doesn't make you a bad mom. Even with all the oxytocin, that love hormone, even with, all the things that are supposed to help us immediately bond to that baby and just feel like all enveloped and all loving, it's okay if it takes some time. I will tell you with my first baby, and he was born cesarean. I think that might have been part of it, but also new mom and, whatever. It took me like a couple months. It felt very foreign. I was like, I will take care of you. I love you in that regard. But to really feel like, oh, bonded and this is my baby, I think I was living in a lot of fear too. But it was just it wasn't, that euphoric thing that moms talk about. And some moms do get it. Actually, I have a friend recently that gave birth and she talked about, I had this euphoria with all of my babies except for these two. And what makes one this and the other that? And there wasn't necessarily anything traumatic. And so it just, hormones or whatever the case, maybe being tired. I mean, I don't know, but it's okay if you do not bond right away with your baby. You will eventually, and it's totally normal. I hope you guys enjoyed this fun episode where we kind of got to take some of those myths from way back then and pull them in today and talk about them. Certainly can see kind of the pattern of how some of these things still exist. I hope we have an opportunity to kind of honor our mothers and our grandmothers in this conversation. It wasn't just to tear them down and all of that. This is really stuff that they were working through and working with at the time. I think the real skill today comes from learning how to filter information and find information that you trust. So I hope that's some of what you find here today. Now, I would love to hear from you. So whether you want to shoot me an email, hello@myessentialbirth, or at myessentialbirth on Instagram, I want to hear, what pregnancy myths did you grow up hearing, or what is the craziest thing that you have heard while you have been pregnant? Let's keep the conversation going, and I will see you guys next week.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.